I wanted to start this story about the return of the manager with a tea I had a little while ago with a guy called Ian Davis, who runs, or used, at that stage ran McKinsey worldwide. And he's obviously an incredibly bright man. He's worked with a wide range of businesses. He's also tremendously humble. And I said to Ian, so honoured, delighted to have tea with you. Wonder if you could kind of share some of your wisdom and genius. And he was like, oh, I know nothing. I'm a simple guy, da-da-da. A wonderfully understated way. He said, but one thing I will tell you is I've lived through 3 recessions. I've worked through 3 recessions. And I think I've seen a pattern about what differentiates those companies that come out of the recession faster than the rest. What is it, the delta that shifts people up? And he said in 1980, where there was a horrendous recession, the answer was strategy. Those organizations that did the analysis, that worked out where was the right place to allocate resources in terms of country or product line or supply chain or whatever, they came out of the recession faster than their competitors. He said in 1991, to me, and this is him speaking, it was clearly technology. Those who use IT to understand their customers better, to increase quality, to reduce costs, to improve efficiency, those were the people who got out of the recession fastest. He said, in my opinion, those 2 are now just things you have to operate. No one goes and says, oh, why don't we sell stuff online? That'll give us competitive advantage for a while, because we know we just have to do that in order to play in the game. Some people from ASOS here, the whole business is based on selling online. So that's not going to keep us an advantage now. So he said, in my opinion, if I look at the recession of 2009, those organizations that are coming out of it fastest are those that focus on talent. Those who've worked out how to attract, retain, and help flourish the people, the best people in their business. And as Seb says, with the increasing turnover of people, and people staying for 12, 14 months, that becomes a really expensive part of how organizations operate. So if talent is the big issue for business, that how we're going to get competitive advantage, and I apply this equally to the government and to the charity sector and to other organizations that are looking for greater efficiency and greater productivities in different ways, then what role does the manager have in all of this? Well, there's an element about why do people stay in organizations. Now, I would love to say we're obsessed by research at Mind You. For those of you who don't know us, one of our other beliefs is science is sexy. In research, we trust. So we're constantly for data and measures and evaluations of what does deliver an impact and what doesn't. Now, I would be lying to you if I said the number 1 reason why people stay in organizations is their manager. It's number 3. So why do I stay? I have someone I can respect, I can learn from, I can grow with, I like. That helps me stay. But there are other things that are more important. The second thing is what makes people perform? What makes me actually do a bit more? And here, the research, and Seb will share more of this in the Performance Management Cafe, is about setting goals that stretch and giving fortnightly or at least frequent feedback on performance against those goals. And that gives an enormous delta on performance. And that feedback and those goals usually come from the manager. I accept not always, there are some exceptions, but by and large, that's where they come from. So the second most important thing of why people perform, and indeed why they change, is their manager. The most important is themselves, their own pathology and views on the life and so forth. And again, we'll talk about that separately. But when it comes to why do people leave, there's an undisputed number 1 here, and that is the manager. That's why people go. It's not always why they go, because there's another, a lovely example I heard the other day of a guy who's working in an IT company, clearly not one here, who finally his manager drove him completely nuts. He said, I've had enough of this, I'm off, I can't face it anymore. I love the company, I love the industry, I love my job, but I can't face the company anymore. So he went up to a recruiter, and he said, look, I'm looking for a new job. And the recruiter said, that's fabulous, because there's a real shortage of people with your skills in this area. There'd be no problem finding you a job at all. So he went home, a bit lighter, relieved, went to sleep, woke up the next morning, thought a bit, and he went back to the recruiter. And he said, did you say there's a real shortage of people in this area? There's lots of jobs available. And the recruiter said, yeah, absolutely, there are loads of them. He said, I know the perfect person for you. And he described his manager perfectly. And sure enough, 3 weeks later, the manager gets a call, and 6 months later, the manager's working somewhere else. So that was a nice, innovative way of solving that problem. So we don't always leave because of our manager. Sometimes we get our manager to leave because of them. But by and large, it's because of the manager that people choose to go. So this is what's going on. What happened 20 years ago with managers? Well, for those of you, most of you look way too young to have been working at that stage, but sadly I was. And I remember back in the early 90s, there was this massive thing called delayering, taking out layers of managers. Bob Horton, who was CEO of BP, announced that he was going to go from 21 levels of manager to 7, removing swathes of managers. I worked with Royal Bank of Scotland at the time a lot as an advisor on their Columbus program, which was the beginning of their great growth period, their 18 years of great growth. Obviously, there's a slight problem with a dodgy deal and government taking them over more recently, but they had a good period before that. And that's based on removing a lot of the decisions from managers and a lot of the layers of managers in the organizations. So are we saying now managers are really important, but hang on, we got rid of them, why are we bringing them all back? And the answer is we need managers, but they're a different kind of manager. And so the manager, the old manager, if you like, best typified by a book by Anthony Sampson called A Company Man, The Rise and Fall of Corporate Life. This manager managed workflow, managed tasks, managed quality, and controlled the people that worked for them. And it was a different kind of manager. It was quite a rational, quite a structured way of looking at management. And the key qualification that got you to accelerate here was an MBA. MBAs were gold dust. This was a really good thing to get and increase the value in the marketplace and make you more employable. We're not talking about that kind of manager. The manager we're talking about now is a manager who knows how to set boundaries, how to motivate, how to engage, how to guide, how to enthuse, how to control, how to direct, how to, in effect, manage human beings, manage people, so that they can flourish and do the best for the organization and indeed for themselves. So where once the MBA was what you wanted, now what you need is the psychology degree. Where once it was Anthony Sampson's view on Company Man, now it's Cialdini's book on influence. So what we're looking for is a very different kind of manager. We originally called this the manager is back, but not as you know her, because we thought the idea that a lot of the traits are ones that are more familiar or traditionally associated with female traits. Now, a lot of people said this looked like it was a diversity program, and they got a bit confused by that, so we changed the title. But it's the spirit of a new set of things. So I would hate us to think it's the same managers coming back. It's a very different kind of manager responsibility. Now, I mentioned a moment ago I care about data and we care about results. And therefore, I will share just a couple of examples. There are many more in the white paper and many more that we can provide for you separately on the business impact of these managers. This is a study that looked at basically, did you think your manager was good at managing performance or not? And those that thought their manager was good at managing performance, and there were some independent metrics to assess that as well, found that the managers who were good at managing performance got 25% greater productivity out of their people than the ones that weren't. And that's a big old gain. A lot of systems and IT is introduced with a lot less promise than that. And most of that gain, 16%, came because the person got better at the job, they were more effective. But 9% came just because they cared. They felt their manager was spending time with them. Now, Google, which is another great company for metrics and data and facts, they researched across all their manager population and segmented it by those that were most and least effective. And they worked out what were the characteristics or the behaviors of those managers that got the best results. And there's a full list of all the list in the white paper. But really came down to spending time with the one-to-one time with the people whom they managed. And that led to a direct correlation in business results. So again, some of these findings are deliciously crystal clear and quite simple, but also incredibly compelling. Another study I'll share with you, and again, there's all this debate about comparing like with like. This study from a guy called Koene, K-O-E-N-E, and he did a study of Dutch supermarkets. And the idea was all these supermarkets across Holland were broad, they're all the same chain, and they were broadly similar. Some are slightly more regional, some are slightly more, but there was no reason why they should perform particularly differently. And he wanted to correlate the different styles of management. He called it leadership, and to be fair, there's an element of leadership because the store manager had their managers, grocery and bakery and fresh foods and then also frontline. The style of leadership with the performance of those stores. And he looked at 3 different kinds of management, and one was transformational, which was the vision, the charisma, but vision and the direction, but also the attention to detail and the momentum, building a very clear path and sticking with that. Then there was the considerate, the person who cared, listened, coached, was supportive, attentive. And then there was the structured, if you like, the old manager style, the company man one. And these were the results on the softer measures, the subjective factors about how good those stores were seen to be. And what we can see here is that those with the structured management underperformed those with the inspirational and the considerate on 3 metrics: general communication, efficiency, and readiness to innovate. Now, if we stop there, we might think, oh, well, that's pretty good. That shows that the considerate and the transformation are about the same. And the structure, the old stuff, which we knew was a bit rubbish, well, that confirms that. But what he then went on to do was to measure against the business metrics of net profit and controllable costs. And here we find that the considerate and the structured are doing roughly the same. and it's the transformational that seems to be making a delta and a difference there. So again, there's lots of research about different types of management having very direct and different types of impact. Mitchells and Butlers, the pub chain that owns All Bar One, and Browns, you may have, or O'Neill's, may have even been to one of the two of those lovely places, they found there's a direct correlation between employee engagement and the quality of food served. And the quality of food served links to customer loyalty and repeat visits and profitability and so on and so forth. And that engagement is linked to the behavior of the manager. So again, a really nice chain of links between behaviors of managers and business impact. So this is where we're at, this is the case, this is the story. What's going wrong? Why aren't we all embracing this and having fantastic managers and getting all the results? It doesn't cost us very much, and the benefits seem to be enormous. And hey, we're not stupid, so why aren't we on the case? We've looked at 6 things that we see that tend to go wrong in the organizations that we work with. And you may recognize some of these, or you may say none of them apply to you, and this would be a good debate and discussion to have later. The first is that for all the good chat, when it comes to promotions, when it comes to pay rises, when it comes to bonuses, an exceptional individual contributor who is poor at people management tends to do better than an average individual contributor who is very good at people management. And that when we go, I've been working with a big bank, global bank at the moment. Banks are particularly not flavour of the month, and they're particularly harsh in this area. But they had all the chief operating officers from across the world in the room for one day to talk about performance management and how it should be done globally across this bank. And they started off with a view that kind of bonuses were the answer. And again, there's lots of research that delightfully shows that's not the case, which we can share and discuss another time. But the issue was, in order to succeed here, that you had a people promise and a franchise promise. The reality was, if you didn't deliver on those, that was just an excuse to knock down your bonus. But doing well in that was never enough to get you up. So do the great people, other great heroes in our organizations, those who are great at people management, they tend not to be. And part of that is because it's on top of everything else. We're not expected to release any of our individual contributor roles when we become manager. We're expected to do it as well. So that's the second issue. The third thing is we look at it and we see the impossible. We've been to organizations where there are over 100 competencies that a manager is supposed to deliver on. And you look at 100 competencies, you've got no chance of working out what it is to do. And different levels of each one, different behaviors. And it's taken a fantastic HR consultancy months to develop these, and I'm sure they're absolutely delicious and make a great deal of sense. But as a communication tool, they're next to useless. And therefore I look at that and go, I can't possibly do that. I don't know what it is, and off I go. I don't bother with that. The next thing is that management development, we have found, is often too little and too late. And what we mean by this is often there's a really good manager course, but it happens a year after I become a manager, or maybe even longer than that. Or I have to be a really good manager in order to go on this course. And even when I go on it, then a lot of the issues aren't quite raising me. They aren't pitching up at the level. So I'm learning how to run a team meeting. I've done quite a few of those already. Maybe learning how to give feedback. Well, you know, I've been in this job for 18 months now. I kind of got the hang of that. The problems I've got is I've got someone who's trying to undermine me in the team. How do I handle that? I've got 2 people who aren't getting on, and they're both critical to the team. What do I do to resolve that? I've got someone who I haven't not getting on with. How do I resolve that? I've got people who are complaining about people, or trying to pinch my people. Those are the problems that I have as a manager. Let's get into those much tougher, often political, often relational, often psychological issues, rather than just the basics. And so people come back to us with that. The fifth one is that good equals popular. And I think the growth of 360 feedback and upward feedback is really powerful, because it gets a challenge on those managers who perhaps as one of the clients we work with called people eaters. They just destroy the people. It's a good way of checking on that. But now it's, in some places, become a substitute for deciding whether someone is a good manager or not. And therefore, they think the key is to be popular. Have you ever seen that episode from Friends when Chandler gets promoted? And he tries to become popular with all the people he used to work with, and it's a complete disaster, and they just have no respect for him. And he isn't popular, and they're busy trying to be nice to his face and being unkind about him at the water cooler. So getting managers to move away from good equals popular, but whilst recognizing that what impact you have does matter. And the final one is who manages the managers. And what we've found is that there's a lot of organizations who focus a lot on first-line managers and a lot on the senior leaders, but the group in the middle are kind of left to their own devices. But these second and third line managers then manage their direct reports as if they're individual contributors. So they say, how are you doing against the goals? Why are you a bit down on this one? What do you need to do to sort that out? Rather than, how are your people performing? Who's underperforming? Why is that? What are you going to address? Who's the person you're least likely to speak to in your team? What are you going to do about that? How are you going to build those connections? So the role of the second and third line managers needs to change significantly if we're going to make the first line manager really good at people management.